The kitchen filled with the aroma of roasted chicken and garlic, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. I busied myself with setting the table, trying to ignore the snide remarks from my mother-in-law, Lydia. "Only family dinner tonight, Madison," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "I'm sure you understand." I forced a smile, having heard that one too many times before. Of course Lydia wouldn't want to impose. Owen, my husband of 20 years, that shot me an apologetic look from across the room. He knew how much these exclusionary tactics hurt me, but he often remained passive, caught between his wife and his mother's manipulations. As I arranged the plates, I couldn't help but overhear Lydia's hushed voice coming from the living room. She was on the phone, her words laced with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. "I can't wait to see you tonight, Sam. This family dinner should be over soon." My heart raced as the pieces fell into place. Lydia's frequent errands and late nights out suddenly made sense. I had to know more. The dinner itself was a tense affair, with Lydia's barbed comments and Harold's disapproving glances casting a pall over the meal. Grace, our daughter, tried to lighten the mood with stories from college, but even her cheerful presence couldn't dispel the cloud of hostility. As we cleared the table, I caught Owen's eye, silently communicating my need to talk later. He nodded, his brow furrowed with concern. Once Lydia and Harold had retired for the evening, Owen and I retreated to the guest room. I wasted no time in recounting what I'd overheard. "Owen, I think your mother is having an affair," I blurted out, my hands trembling. He stared at me, his expression a mix of disbelief and hurt. "Are you sure? With who?" "Some guy named Sam," I replied, the words feeling surreal as they left my lips. Owen's jaw clenched, and I could see the conflict raging within him. His loyalty to his family battled with the desire to protect me, the woman he had vowed to cherish. "We'll get to the bottom of this," he said finally, his voice resolute. "No more secrets, no more lies." As we lay in bed that night, my mind raced with possibilities. Part of me wanted to confront Lydia, to expose her deceit and demand answers. But another part feared the consequences, the potential fallout that could tear our family apart. One thing was certain: I would no longer be a passive observer in my own life. It was time to take a stand, to fight for the respect and honesty I deserved. With Owen by my side, I felt a newfound determination coursing through my veins. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready for whatever came next. As I lay awake that night, my mind drifted back to the early days of my marriage, when the promise of joining Owen's family filled me with excitement and hope. I remembered the first time I met Lydia, her warm smile masking the icy demeanor that would soon reveal itself. "Welcome to the family, dear," she had said, pulling me into an embrace that felt more like a vice grip than a loving gesture. Those initial months were a whirlwind of family gatherings and thinly veiled jabs from Lydia. "You'll learn how we do things around here," she would say, her words dripping with condescension as she criticized everything from my cooking to my choice of decor. Owen tried his best to support me, but he often found himself caught in the middle, torn between his wife and his mother's manipulations. "She means well," he would say, his eyes pleading with me to understand. But I saw through Lydia's facade. Her constant need for control and attention was suffocating, and no matter how hard I tried, I could never seem to meet her impossible standards. The tension reached a breaking point when I became pregnant with Grace. Instead of sharing in our joy, Lydia seemed threatened by the prospect of a new addition to the family. "I hope you're prepared for the sacrifices motherhood demands," she had sneered, her words cutting deeper than any knife. Through it all, I clung to the belief that time and patience would eventually win Lydia over. But as the years passed, her behavior only grew more erratic and manipulative. I remember the day Grace was born, a moment that should have been filled with pure happiness. But even then, Lydia found a way to cast a shadow over the occasion. "She has your nose," she had said, her tone dripping with disdain as she held my newborn daughter. "Let's hope she takes after her father's side of the family." In that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized that no amount of effort on my part would ever be enough for Lydia. Her need for control and her disdain for me ran too deep. From that day forward, I vowed to protect my little family from her toxic influence. I would no longer be a passive observer, allowing her to dictate the terms of our lives. With each passing year, my resolve grew stronger. I learned to deflect her barbs with grace and humor, refusing to let her negativity consume me. And slowly but surely I began to see the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. As I reflected on those memories, a newfound determination washed over me. The revelation of Lydia's affair was just the beginning. It was time to unravel the web of lies she had woven, to expose the truth and reclaim the respect and dignity I deserved. With Owen by my side, I knew we could weather any storm. Together we would face the coming confrontation head-on, refusing to let Lydia's manipulations tear our family apart any longer. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready to fight for the life I deserved. A life free from her toxic influence, filled with love, laughter, and the unwavering support of those who truly mattered. The tension was palpable as we gathered for what would be our last family dinner at Lydia and Harold's house. I could feel the weight of years' worth of slights and exclusions pressing down on me, threatening to shatter my resolve. As we took our seats at the table, Lydia shot me a pointed glare, her eyes narrowing with disdain. "I hope you're not too picky tonight, Madison," she sneered, placing a steaming dish in front of me. I forced a smile, my heart racing as I recognized the unmistakable aroma of shellfish, an ingredient I was deathly allergic to. This was no accident. Lydia knew exactly what she was doing. Owen must have sensed my discomfort, for he leaned in close and whispered, "Don't touch it. We'll deal with this later." The meal progressed in tense silence, punctuated only by the occasional jab from Lydia or Harold's disapproving grunts. Grace tried her best to lighten the mood, regaling us with stories from college, but even her cheerful presence couldn't dispel the cloud of hostility that hung over the table. As the evening drew to a close, I could no longer contain the anger and frustration that had been simmering within me. Enough was enough. "Lydia," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained fury, "why is it that I always seem to get sick after eating your meals?" She feigned innocence, her eyes widening in mock surprise. "Whatever do you mean, dear? You must be picky, that's all." Owen slammed his fist on the table, startling us all. "Cut the crap, Mom," he growled. "We both know you put shellfish in Madison's dish tonight." Lydia's facade crumbled, her lips curling into a cruel sneer. Well, maybe if she learned to appreciate my cooking, I wouldn't have to resort to such measures. The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was determined to emerge victorious. Owen's face was a mask of fury and disgust. "That's it," he said, his voice low and resolute. "We're done. No more dinners, no more visits until you learn to treat my wife with respect." Lydia's eyes widened in shock, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. For once, she seemed at a loss for words. As we gathered our things to leave, I felt a surge of pride and relief. Finally, after years of enduring Lydia's manipulations, Owen had taken a stand. He had chosen me, chosen our family, over the toxic influence of his mother. In the car ride home, a sense of determination washed over me. This was just the beginning. Lydia's deceit ran deeper than any of us could have imagined, and I was determined to unravel the web of lies she had so carefully constructed. With Owen by my side, I knew we could weather any storm. Together, we would seek the truth, no matter how painful or devastating it might be. And in the end, we would emerge stronger, our bond forged in the fires of adversity. As we pulled into the driveway, I turned to Owen, my eyes shining with resolve. "This isn't over," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "We're just getting started." The weeks following our confrontation with Lydia's deceit were a whirlwind of emotions. Owen and I found ourselves at a crossroads, torn between our loyalty to family and the pain of her betrayal. As the shock of her affair with a younger man wore off, a new realization set in. We could no longer turn a blind eye to her transgressions. It was during a business trip that the gravity of her actions hit me full force. I had stopped for a late dinner at a cafe, my mind still reeling from the revelations of her infidelity, when I spotted her. There she was, Lydia, in the company of a man half her age. The intimacy between them was unmistakable, the way he leaned in close, the casual touch of his hand on her arm. My heart raced as the pieces fell into place. This was her lover, the one she had been so desperate to hide from me. In that moment, a wave of anger and hurt washed over me, bitter and acidic. All the times she had mocked my commitment to our marriage, all the barbs she had thrown in the name of protecting our family, it was a lie, a charade to conceal her own deceit. I felt the sting of her duplicity, the years of manipulation and disrespect she had leveled at me. The realization was a betrayal, a violation of the trust I had extended to her as the wife I had vowed to love and cherish. As I watched them part ways, the young man oblivious to the pain he had helped inflict, a new resolve took root within me. No more would I be complicit in her deception. No more would I allow her to cast doubt on the strength of my convictions. Owen had warned me of the storm that would follow, but in that moment, I was ready. I would stand firm against the winds of her treachery, and I would fight for the love and respect I deserved. When I returned home that night, I found Owen waiting, his eyes filled with concern and a determination that mirrored my own. He could sense the turmoil within me, the pain of her betrayal, still fresh and raw. As I recounted what I had witnessed, the hurt in his voice was palpable. Yet in that anguish, I found the strength to confront the truth we could no longer deny. "She crossed a line," Owen said, his voice trembling with the weight of her deceit. "We can no longer turn a blind eye to her transgressions." In that moment, I knew what I had to do. The path ahead would not be easy, but I was ready to face the storm, to fight for the love and respect we deserved. No more would we be complicit in her manipulations. No more would we allow her to erode the foundations of our marriage. It was time to confront her, to lay bare her lies and demand the truth she had so long denied us. As the night wore on, our resolve only grew stronger. We would stand united, a bastion against the tide of her betrayal, and in that crucible we would forge a new path, one paved with the strength of our convictions and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. In the days following my encounter with Lydia and her lover, Owen and I found ourselves at a crossroads. The weight of her betrayal hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the lies and manipulation that had plagued our family for far too long. It was then that Owen suggested we seek outside help, someone who could unravel the tangled web of deceit that Lydia had so carefully woven. A private investigator, he reasoned, might be our best chance at uncovering the full extent of her transgressions. At first, I was hesitant, wary of the potential fallout that such a move might bring. But as the days wore on and the sting of her infidelity refused to fade, I knew we had to take action. No longer could we turn a blind eye to her misdeeds. No longer could we allow her to erode the foundations of our marriage and our family. The investigator we hired was a seasoned professional, a man who had seen it all and whose steely gaze betrayed nothing of the sordid tales he had undoubtedly encountered. As we laid out the details of Lydia's affair, his expression remained impassive, his pen scratching notes on a well-worn pad. "Leave it to me," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I'll get to the bottom of this." And so, the investigation began, a silent war waged in the shadows as the investigator meticulously pieced together the fragments of Lydia's double life. With each passing day, new revelations came to light, each more shocking than the last. It wasn't just one affair, we soon learned, but a long and sordid history of infidelity that stretched back decades. Lydia had been a master of deception, skillfully concealing her liaisons from Harold and the rest of the family, all while maintaining her carefully cultivated facade of the devoted matriarch. As the evidence mounted, a sense of disbelief and anger washed over us. How could she have betrayed us so completely, so callously? All those years of manipulation and disdain, all the time she had cast aspersions on our commitment to family, it was all a lie, a smokescreen to conceal her own selfish desires. Owen, in particular, took the revelations hard. His eyes clouded with a mix of hurt and disgust as he pored over the investigator's findings, each new detail a fresh wound to his already battered heart. "All these years, living in lies," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "How could she do this to us, to our family?" In that moment, I saw a fire ignite within him, a resolve born of the ashes of his shattered illusions. No longer would he be the passive observer, caught in the crossfire of his mother's machinations. This time he would stand firm, a bulwark against the tide of her deceit. As for me, the revelations only strengthened my determination to seek justice, to demand the truth that Lydia had so long denied us. I could no longer sit idly by, allowing her to dictate the terms of our lives, to cast doubt on the strength of our convictions. With the evidence in hand, we knew what we had to do. It was time to confront Lydia, to lay bare her lies and hold her accountable for the pain and betrayal she had inflicted upon us all. No more would we be complicit in her deception. No more would we allow her to erode the foundations of our family. As we made our way to Lydia's house, the weight of the moment pressed down upon us. This was it, the moment of reckoning we had been steeling ourselves for. With each step, our resolve grew stronger, our conviction more unshakable. When Lydia opened the door, her expression betrayed nothing of the storm that was about to descend upon her. But as we confronted her with the evidence, her facade began to crumble, the mask of the devoted matriarch slipping away to reveal the truth that had been lurking beneath all along. Her eyes widened in shock, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. For once, the woman who had always had a cutting remark, a barbed insult at the ready, was rendered speechless. "How could you?" Owen demanded, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "How could you betray us like this, year after year?" Lydia's gaze darted between us, a cornered animal seeking an escape. But there was no escape, not this time. The truth had finally caught up with her, and she would be forced to reckon with the consequences of her actions. As the confrontation unfolded, each new revelation only deepened the chasm between us, the bonds of family fraying under the weight of her deceit. But through it all, Owen and I remained steadfast, a united front against the storm of her betrayal. In the end, it was Lydia who was left reeling, her carefully constructed facade in tatters, her lies exposed for all to see. And as we walked away, hand in hand, I knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but we would face it together, stronger and more resilient than ever before. For too long, Lydia had held us captive to her manipulations, her need for control and attention. But no more. This was our moment, our chance to reclaim the love and respect that had been so cruelly denied us, and we would seize it with everything we had, emerging from the ashes of her betrayal as the victors in our own story. The tension was palpable as we gathered for what would be the final climactic family dinner at Lydia and Harold's house. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, the weight of years' worth of lies and manipulation pressing down upon us all. As we took our seats at the table, Lydia's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a cruel sneer. It was clear from the outset that this would be no ordinary meal. This was her grand stage, her opportunity to assert her dominance and remind us all of the power she held over our fractured family. The dinner itself was a masterclass in passive aggression, each course a carefully orchestrated jab at my place within the family. From the blatant exclusion of any dishes I might enjoy to the pointed comments about my inability to fit in, Lydia left no stone unturned in her quest to make me feel unwelcome. Through it all, Owen sat in tense silence, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with a fury I had rarely seen before. I could sense the internal struggle raging within him, the desire to protect me, warring with the loyalty he still felt towards his mother, however misguided it might be. As the evening drew to a close and Lydia's barbs grew increasingly venomous, I knew I could no longer remain silent. The time for reckoning had arrived, and I was determined to confront her deceit head-on, no matter the consequences. "Lydia," I said, my voice steady and unwavering, "I think it's time we addressed the elephant in the room." She feigned innocence, her eyes widening in mock surprise. "Whatever do you mean, dear?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that was about to unfold. "I know about your affair, Lydia. I saw you with him, that young man you've been sneaking around with." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Lydia's face drained of color, her carefully cultivated mask of control slipping for the briefest of moments. Harold, too, seemed shaken to his core, his eyes darting between us as the realization of his wife's betrayal began to sink in. "How dare you?" Lydia hissed, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "How dare you accuse me of such a thing?" But I was ready for her denials, her attempts to deflect and obfuscate. With a steady hand, I reached into my purse, and withdrew the damning evidence. A series of photographs, each one capturing Lydia in intimate moments with her lover. "I have proof, Lydia," I said, sliding the photographs across the table towards her. "There's no use denying it any longer." For a moment she simply stared at the images, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, her demeanor changed, her eyes hardening with a cold, calculating resolve. "So what?" she spat, her voice dripping with disdain. "You think you're the first to uncover my little secret? You're nothing but a footnote in a long line of disappointments, Madison." Her words cut deep, but I refused to be cowed. "Not this time." "That's enough, Mom," Owen interjected, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "We're done with your lies, your manipulations. It's over." Lydia's gaze snapped towards her son, her eyes narrowing into slits. "You'd choose her over your own mother?" she sneered. "After everything I've done for this family?" But Owen remained steadfast, his jaw set in a firm line. "You've done nothing but tear us apart with your selfishness and deceit. It ends now." As the confrontation reached its crescendo, the air thick with recriminations and long-buried resentments, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This was the moment I had been steeling myself for, the culmination of years of struggle and pain. And in that moment, as Lydia's carefully constructed facade crumbled around her, I knew that we had emerged victorious. The truth had finally been laid bare, her lies exposed for all to see. There would be no more manipulation, no more exclusion or disdain. From this point forward, our family would be built on a foundation of honesty and respect, free from the toxic influence that had plagued us for far too long. As we gathered our things to leave, I caught Owen's eye, and in that shared glance, I saw a world of understanding and resolve. We were in this together, united in our determination to forge a new path, one paved with the strength of our convictions and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. The road would be long, and the wounds inflicted by Lydia's betrayal would take time to heal. But we would weather the storm, emerging stronger and more resilient than ever before. For too long, we had been held captive by her lies and manipulations. But no more. This was our moment, our chance to reclaim the love and respect that had been so cruelly denied us. And we would seize it with everything we had, emerging from the ashes of her deceit as the victors in our own story. The aftermath of our confrontation with Lydia was like a storm that refused to dissipate, the fallout extending long into the night as the full weight of her betrayal settled upon us all. In the hours that followed, Lydia made futile attempt after futile attempt to explain away her actions, to cast herself as the victim in a twisted narrative of her own making. But her lies rang hollow, her excuses falling on increasingly deaf ears as the depth of her deceit became impossible to ignore. "It was just a fling, a moment of weakness," she pleaded, her eyes darting between Owen and Harold, desperate for any shred of sympathy or understanding. But Owen remained unmoved, his expression a mask of barely contained fury. "A moment of weakness?" he spat. "This was a decades-long pattern of lies and infidelity, Mom. There's no excusing that." Lydia's gaze shifted to Harold, her eyes brimming with crocodile tears. "Surely you can see reason, dear. We've been through so much together." But Harold, too, had reached his limit. The man who had once been so steadfastly loyal, so willing to overlook his wife's flaws, now regarded her with a mix of disgust and resignation. "I can't do this anymore, Lydia," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of years' worth of disillusionment. "I want a separation. I need time to process all of this." Lydia's face crumpled, her carefully constructed facade finally cracking under the weight of her own misdeeds. In that moment, she seemed smaller, more fragile, a far cry from the domineering force of nature she had once been. As the night wore on, and Lydia's pleas grew increasingly desperate, Owen's siblings began to weigh in, their voices a chorus of condemnation and disbelief. "How could you do this to our family?" David demanded, his eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. Jonathan, ever the protective older brother, was even more direct. "You've gone too far this time, Mom. We're done enabling your behavior." One by one, they pledged their support to Owen and me, vowing to limit their contact with Lydia until she could take full accountability for her actions. The once fractured family had found a new sense of unity, forged in the crucible of her betrayal. Through it all, I remained steadfast by Owen's side. a silent pillar of strength and support. This was his battle to fight, his moment to confront the demons of his past and emerge victorious. And as the night drew to a close, and Lydia's protests grew increasingly feeble, I could see the weight lifting from Owen's shoulders, the burden of her manipulation finally lifting. "There's no repairing this, Mom," he said, his voice heavy with finality. "Not this time." Lydia opened her mouth as if to protest, but the words seemed to die on her lips. For once, she had been rendered speechless, her carefully cultivated armor of lies and manipulation stripped away to reveal the fragile, desperate woman beneath. As we gathered our things to leave, I took Owen's hand in mine, our fingers intertwining in a silent show of solidarity. "We're stronger together," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. "No matter what comes next, we'll face it as a team." Owen's gaze met mine, and in that moment, I saw a world of understanding and resolve. We had weathered the storm, emerging battered but unbroken, our bond forged in the fires of adversity. The road ahead would be long and arduous, the wounds inflicted by Lydia's betrayal taking time to heal. But we would walk that path together, united in our determination to forge a new future, one free from the toxic influence that had plagued our family for far too long. As we stepped out into the cool night air, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph, a quiet joy in the knowledge that we had finally broken free from Lydia's grip. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, our love and resilience had prevailed. The war was over, and we had emerged victorious, ready to embrace the new dawn that lay ahead, a future filled with the promise of happiness, healing, and the unwavering support of those who truly mattered. In the weeks and months that followed our confrontation with Lydia, a palpable shift took hold within our family. It was as if a dark cloud had been lifted, the toxic influence that had plagued us for so long finally dissipating. Without Lydia's constant machinations and manipulations, we were free to rediscover the bonds that had once held us together. The shared history, the love and laughter that had been overshadowed by her need for control. Owen's brothers, David and Jonathan, were among the first to embrace this newfound freedom. For years, they had been caught in the crossfire of Lydia's games, forced to choose between loyalty to their mother and the desire to protect their own families from her toxic influence. But now, with the truth laid bare and Lydia's grip on the family loosened, they seemed to rediscover a sense of camaraderie and kinship that had been long absent. "It's like a weight has been lifted," David confided in me one afternoon as we gathered for a casual family lunch. "I can finally breathe without worrying about setting Mom off." Jonathan nodded in agreement, his eyes shining with a newfound sense of relief. No more walking on eggshells, no more playing into her twisted games. We're free. As the weeks turned into months, this sense of liberation only grew stronger. Family gatherings, once tense affairs marred by Lydia's barbed comments and exclusionary tactics, became joyous occasions filled with laughter and genuine connection. Grace, our daughter, seemed to blossom in this new environment, her usual reserve giving way to a radiant confidence that warmed my heart. No longer would she be forced to bear witness to her grandmother's cruelty, her spirit slowly eroded by the constant undercurrent of hostility. "It's like we're a real family again," she confided in me one evening, her eyes shining with a happiness I hadn't seen in years. Even Harold, once so steadfastly loyal to his wife, seemed to find a newfound sense of peace in the aftermath of our confrontation. Though the pain of Lydia's betrayal still lingered, he seemed to take solace in the knowledge that he had finally taken a stand, refusing to enable her destructive behavior any longer. As for Owen and me, our bond only grew stronger in the wake of the storm we had weathered together. We had faced the darkness head-on, emerging battered but unbroken, our love and resilience forged in the fires of adversity. It was during one of our quiet evenings at home, as we sat together on the porch, basking in the warmth of the setting sun, that I felt a sense of profound gratitude wash over me. "We made it," I murmured, my fingers intertwined with Owen's. "Against all odds, we made it through." Owen turned to me, his eyes shining with a mix of love and pride. "We did," he replied, his voice thick with emotion, "and we're stronger for it." In that moment, as the weight of our journey settled upon us, I knew that our story was far from over. The road ahead would undoubtedly hold its share of challenges and obstacles, but we would face them together, united in our determination to forge a new path, one paved with the strength of our convictions and the unwavering support of those who truly mattered. And then, as if the universe itself was conspiring to reinforce this newfound sense of hope and renewal, I felt a flutter deep within me, a subtle shift that spoke of new beginnings and the promise of brighter days to come. "Owen," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of joy and disbelief, I think I might be pregnant." His eyes widened, his expression a kaleidoscope of emotions, surprise, elation, and a profound sense of wonder. In that moment, the weight of our struggles seemed to melt away, replaced by a singular, all-encompassing truth. We had emerged from the ashes of Lydia's betrayal, not just survivors but victors, ready to embrace the future with open arms. As Owen pulled me into a fierce embrace, his tears of joy mingling with my own, I knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, one filled with the promise of happiness, healing, and the unwavering support of those who had stood by us through the darkest of storms. The battle had been won, and though the scars might never fully heal, we would carry them as badges of honor, reminders of the resilience and love that had sustained us through it all. With our family by our side and a new life blossoming within me, I knew that the future was ours for the taking, a future forged in the fires of adversity, tempered by the strength of our convictions, and shining with the promise of a love that had weathered the storm and emerged triumphant.